What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. You know the drill at this point is FPL price reveal day 3. There's likely to be a day 4 tomorrow as well. Then all the teams will have been revealed and hopefully we'll have the game launch on Tuesday. Hopefully it's not much later than that. I'm ready to build my game week 1 draft. So in this one, we're going to go through the prices that we haven't already been through. Bit of a reaction, what it might mean for our drafts and stuff like that. So if you enjoy it, give it a like. Hit that subscribe button as well if you want to see more content throughout this FPL season. So we're going to kick off this video with Chelsea. Really quickly on fixtures, they look pretty good. I know they've got to play Spurs in game week 2, but it is at home at least. But then Everton, Leeds, Leicester and Southampton outside of that. That's a pretty nice opening 5 game weeks. And Mason Mount at 8 million is definitely a contender for our game week 1 squads. I think it's one of those prices, you're always going to get them, where it's not too expensive, it's not too cheap, it's just right. It means he's not a no-brainer, but he's definitely up for consideration, because in the 8 million bracket, right, so far, then we got Mount, we got Saka, we got Diaz, we got Bowen, who I'll come on to in a minute, but he's actually 8.5 million, so he's just a little bit more expensive. And then you've got the 2 Man City midfielders in Mahrez and Foden, and most of those players are not completely nailed on. Now, I know we're living in a world now where in the Premier League there's lots of money, there's big squads, and I don't expect Mason Mount to start every game, but I expect him to start the majority. I think Saka will probably start almost every game as well. Outside of that, Diaz, Mahrez and Foden, they're probably going to share a few minutes along the way, at least more so than Mount and Saka do. So that's why I think Mount is a genuine option. Whether or not he makes our squads, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, I've probably said that a lot on these videos, but I do think it's a nice enough price. Reece James and Chilwell have come in at 6 million. For me, that's a little bit too cheap. I just look at it as, is Reece James and Chilwell on their day? I know they've maybe got a few more injury concerns, and I know maybe they're not quite as nailed, but are they 1.5 million worse than Trent Alexander-Arnold? Are they a million worse than Robertson and Cancelo? I don't think they are. And if they are fit to start the season, whether Chelsea are playing a 4 at the back or a wing-back system, they are good enough fixtures to have maybe one, if not both, of those players in the team. Now, just because they're cheap, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's at least opened up a bit of a conversation. So now, instead of maybe people saying they're going to have Salah, Trent and Robertson, they might think, well, I can get a Chelsea defender for $1 million less than Robertson. Maybe I'll try and get Diaz instead, and I'll double up on the Liverpool attack instead of the Liverpool defence. The other thing as well is it means players like Cancelo aren't an absolute lock in our teams. For what it's worth, I do think these prices and the prices of the attackers and stuff like that are just going to make everyone go towards premium defence. I think like people are going to have at least 3 premium defenders, if not 4, and maybe 5. And I know we talk about that every season at the start, and by the time we make our game week 1 squads, we go away from it. But I think given what happened last year, how good Trent, Robertson, Cancelo, James and Chilwell were, I think most people will veer towards that in game week 1 because they are so consistent and the prices are so good. Obviously, Chelsea have lost a few defenders in, like, obviously Christensen and Rudiger as well, but I still think there'll be a decent defence. And for 6 million, how attacking these two are, they are really good prices. And right now, if I had to build a squad, I'd probably have both of them, to be honest, and then just see who else I could fit in outside of that. I guess, look, 2 away games in the first 3 and Spurs at home, you could look at that and say it's not that great, but these, honestly, the defence has been so good and they are so attacking. I think you've got to give both of them serious consideration. I'd be very surprised if a lot of people don't have at least one. Obviously, we still have a few more prices to wait for, like Spurs defenders, for example. Looking at the rest, there's quite a lot of excitement that Mendy is only 5 million. He's not actually that good, right? That's probably why he is 5 million. It is nice that FPL have reduced goalkeeper prices. So Mendy's 5. I think Alisson is 5.5. I'm going to assume that Edison will also be 5.5. Based on the points last year, Lloris was the second highest scoring keeper, so I think he might come in at 5.5 as well. I think everyone else will be 5 or less. So Mendy is okay, but to put that into context, he got 130 points last year. That was the same as the year before, and the season before that he got 140. So even goalkeepers like David De Gea and Kasper Schmeichel outscored Mendy last year. So and it's not really a position you want to change too much. Maybe if you're going to go for an early wild card, you could just target the fixtures with someone like him and then move him on. But I don't think he's a no-brainer. He is now part of the conversation, because I think if he's 5.5, it would just be a no-go. But I think the excitement levels aren't really warranted. I'm not sure I'm that excited about him, especially when you can get James and Chilwell for $1 million more, who are just so attacking. They've just got so many more avenues to points. Elsewhere, I mean, look, players like Hudson-Odoi, Jorginho at 6 million. I know he's like the penalty taker, but it's just not that exciting. I don't think there's too many, at least of those two players that we're going to be looking at. Pulisic possibly, but I feel like we've been saying that for a while, that Pulisic's going to nail down a spot and maybe do well. Like, they was apparently in the market for Rafinha. They're still looking at Sterling. That doesn't bode well for Pulisic getting consistent starts. So if there's injuries at some point and he does get a run in the team, I do like that price point, but I don't think he's going to make it into Game Week 1 squads, that's for sure. The other two things to notice are really the prices of Havertz and Werner. So they're exactly the same. Werner's come down in price. Havertz is now a forward. They're both 8 million. I think as it stands, it looks like Havertz is going to line up as the number 9 for Chelsea. I know there's talk about Ronaldo going there, but honestly, I think that would be a big mistake for Chelsea to go for that. So if Havertz is the number 9, that is a very interesting price point. He's the same price as Mount, but he takes up a forward spot. So with forwards, there has been last year not too many options. Havertz 8 million playing number 9 for Chelsea, I think that's pretty good. And if you wanted a different midfielder, there's lots of options around that 8 million mark if you didn't want to go for Mason Mount. So I do think he's one to watch. I think if Chelsea sign a new forward, that will obviously not be great. But right now, it looks like he will be the kind of first choice starter, especially with Lukaku going on loan. So I quite like that 8 million mark. I don't think Werner's going to make it into our teams anytime soon, but Havertz is definitely an interesting one. So Havertz, Mount, Reece James and Chilwell all looking pretty good. Elsewhere, right now at least, I don't think there's too much excitement. So we've had West Ham as well. Bowen has come in at 8.5 million. Some people think that's a little bit too expensive. I think I did predict 8.5 million in my price predictions video. For what it's worth, I did get a lot of player prices wrong as well, especially the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold. But I think once he hit that 200 point plus barrier, they were always going to increase the price by quite a lot. And I think compared to a lot of the other I know some people think the 0.5 million extra is too much, but he is pretty much going to start every single game for West Ham. And I don't think you can necessarily say that as much about the £8 million midfielders outside of maybe Saka and possibly Mason Mount to a certain extent. Like even Diaz surely is going to share some minutes with the likes of Jota and Nunez as well. So yeah, I think Bowen for 8.5 is fair. I do think it's crazy, just to be a broken record for a little bit more in these price reveal videos, that he's gone from 6.5 million to 8.5 million because he's got 200 points or more once. Trent's done it twice now. He's gone from 7.5 to 7.5. And I know people like being able to get all the best players for cheap, and I get it, but it almost like takes so many decisions out of our hands. Like the way the prices are set up, it's very hard to justify just not going for lots of premium defenders and then just fitting the rest of the team in. And I think if you price Trent, who is as good as Bowen, at the same price, it gives you something to think about, right? Maybe you play around with your attackers a little bit more. So I think Bowen's price is correct. I just think Trent's price is wrong. So, I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. With Antonio 7.5 million, he had to be that price. Like, I think when you've priced Bamford at 7.5 and Watkins at 7.5, Antonio was never going to be cheaper. Remember, he did start the last season really well, but I do think the amount of minutes that he had to play just took a toll. So, the summer break could be pretty decent for him. I do think the fixtures are mostly going to put us off West Ham players because they've got to play City, Spurs and Chelsea in the opening 6. Although if you look a little bit shorter term, in the opening 4, they've got Forest, Brighton and Villa, so it doesn't look quite as bad. It depends whether you're looking at 4 or 6 weeks and how many other players you might want to change in your squad early on. So I don't think Antonio is bad at 7.5. I just think a lot of people are going to have ingrained what happened last season, especially for most of the kind of the latter half, maybe even the last 3 quarters of the season where he just did not perform. And also his goal threat did come down compared to previous seasons as well. So I don't think we can go there, but I think it's fair that there is a million difference between Bowen and Antonio. Aguard, I guess it's pronounced like Aguard, maybe 5 million, like whatever. I don't think most of us are going to go for West Ham defenders at that. I mean, Cresswell has been a fairly consistent performer, I guess, at 5 million. But again, I think people are going to look at it as like, well, for 1 million more, I can get James and Chilwell. If I take a bit of money out of my attack, I can go for the likes of Cancelo, Trent and Robertson. And I just think when you look at it like that, like I said, the premium defenders just look so good. So again, I don't think these West Ham players are necessarily badly priced. I just think it's the other players. I think defenders in general maybe need a little bit of a price hike. Because a Cresswell at 5 million will definitely outscore pretty much every 5 million midfielder. So maybe defenders just need a little bit of a price hike across the board, just so we can maybe mix things up a little bit. Because when you've got like Cresswell at 5 million, like and other defenders at 4.5, like whoever gets the first choice right back spot out of Sofao or Johnson, again, it just makes like promoted side defenders just not interesting at all. And that's good for the game, right? Because most people want the top players. But when you price it like that, again, it's just less and less of a decision to have to make. So I think based on the rest of the prices, the West Ham prices are okay. But I don't think they're all that interesting outside of probably Bowen and maybe Antonio. Again, if Sofao Johnson locks down that right back spot, and I don't know if we know exactly who it will be going into the season. We'll have a look at pre-season. They could be a good option, but how many 4.5 million spots are we really going to have with all those premium defenders? Elsewhere, look, Fornals, Lanzini, they're okay prices. Again, I don't think they're going to make it into our squads. Benrahma was a big hit at the start of last season, but obviously it was Bowen that shone through for the rest of the season. So they're all potential options, but I just think with those fixtures, there's probably better ways to spend the money. And Bowen and possibly Antonio are probably the only ones we're going to look at. I guess, like I said, Sofao and Johnson could maybe be competition to Dunk and Tomiyasu, but I mean, the grand scheme of things, trying to figure out which 4.5 million defender to have sat on the bench is probably not that exciting. Okay, so Newcastle are a team where I think FPL managers have been kind of quietly anticipating their prices, because obviously there was some improvement last year. I talked about context for Man United yesterday, and obviously I do think season-long stats are important, but we need to take into account that Newcastle got new owners, new manager, new signings as well, and there was that improvement. I do think that I am quite a bit more cautious on Newcastle than a lot of people. I feel like sometimes when they're talked about now, they're almost talked about as if they're already challenging for the top six, and I'm not really sure they're there yet. And their defence is definitely better than it was at the start of last season when they were a team to target, but also don't think they're a team to worry about either. So that's kind of where my head is at with them. And I think, look, fixtures are always going to dictate what our game week 1 squads look like, and Newcastle's opening fixtures are not great outside of that Nottingham Forest game. Having to play Man City and Liverpool in the opening 5 game weeks and Brighton away is not great. But ultimately, I think I'm prepared to have my mind change. But I think right now, the likes of St. Maximin at 6.5, similar to Trossard, just not interested. And Guimaraes, I'm just not sure he's going to continue to score goals at maybe... Like, it's not like he scored like 10, 20 goals in the time he was there last year. But I'm not convinced he's going to keep up the kind of rate that he was doing it at. Maybe he'll be an okay £6 million midfielder at some point, but I really need to be convinced by that. So those two players I'm not really interested in. Callum Wilson had to be 7.5, right? It's the same as Antonio. Bamford was 7.5, Watkins, etc. Wilson had to be as well. I'm sure, unless they sign a new number 9, he will be an option at some point this year. Because again, there is that improvement from Newcastle. You'd hope they'd score a few more goals than they maybe did, obviously, under Steve Bruce and stuff like that. And he is on penalties as well. So as long as he can stay fit, he could be good. And I'm hopeful that unless he gets like a hat-trick or a brace against Nottingham Forest, that because the fixtures aren't great, his price might actually come down a little bit, although I'm not expecting his ownership to be huge straight away. So yeah, so Maximin and Guimaraes, I'm not convinced I'll have them in my team at any point this season, but, you know, never say never. Callum Wilson, possibly an option for sure, and I think that's a perfectly fair price. Again, none of these prices are too cheap. None of them are really that expensive, and I think that goes for the rest of them as well. Some people were expecting Trippier to come in at 5.5 million. I don't know why. I'm pretty sure I didn't predict... I don't even think I talked about Trippier, but 5.5 would just seem a bit expensive for a Newcastle defender who, yes, he's fairly attacking, but it's not like he's Trent Alexander-Arnold or Reece James playing for Newcastle. So 5 was to be expected, I think. Same as for Nick Pope. I just think FPL have probably been a bit cautious that Nick Pope has been a great goalkeeper for FPL in the past, and he's playing for a team that probably will see some defensive improvement, but still has to make saves, and that is why he's not 4.5. So whether or not we go for him or Ramsdale or Mendy or spend a bit extra, we'll have to put a bit of, or I will put some thought into that when I start building my squads, when I start looking a bit more in depth. But right now I think he's at a price where with those opening fixtures you probably just don't go for him. But maybe when the fixtures get better, we're on wild cards and stuff like that, Nick Pope might become kind of part of the equation. And then we're going to have to wait and see kind of what other signings Newcastle make. Obviously they've signed Botman already, but they could make even more like transfers in. So that might play around with who the kind of first choice defence is, first choice midfield, etc. But obviously Burn or Share, if they get to start at any point, 4.5 million is a pretty nice price, I would say, for a Newcastle defender. Again, another bit of competition for the likes of Tomiyasu, Dunk, Sofal, Johnson, etc. And elsewhere, like Willock, like imagine all the hype a couple of seasons ago when he absolutely smashed it. He's done absolutely nothing last year. Again, 5 million maybe at some point, but I just don't see it. So yeah, I think the prices for Newcastle are pretty fair. I think Wilson's the one that kind of stands out for me. A lot of people like Trippier. I got to acknowledge that. A lot of people really like him. And maybe, to be fair, from a defensive point of view, maybe Nottingham Forest, Brighton and Wolves aren't that bad. But again, I just keep thinking about those premium defenders. It's hard to just not go for them because they are so cheap. And I think that is what is going to rule out a lot of defenders for us, especially in game week 1. Okay, so Southampton, I'm going to be honest, they weren't really one of the teams that I was that excited about seeing the prices for. I mean, the fixtures aren't great either, the opening 5 fixtures. But ultimately, I'm just not a fan of most of their players for FPL, at least not right now. Again, never say never, etc. At some point in the season, I might want to own them. But from the get-go, they don't really excite me too much. The problem with Ward-Prowse, as I say, like the last couple of seasons, is for 6.5 million, that's a perfectly acceptable price for him. And I'm sure for 6.5 million, in and around that price, he'll probably be right up there come the end of the season for total points, because things like appearance points add up, and he will play every single game. He's also on free kicks, as we know, and is very good at them, and he has penalties too. So he's got a few different avenues to points. The problem is his points per match are usually quite low, because his open play, kind of goal threat and kind of creative potential is just not really there. So you are relying on those set pieces, and it's very difficult to know when they're going to happen. Like for a normal transfer into your team, you'll just pick a good player, good open play threat. If they've got free kicks and penalties, great. If they've got good fixtures, you give them a chance. With Ward-Prowse, it doesn't necessarily always work like that, and that is why I just don't really ever like having him in my team. Again, maybe at some point this season I'll put him in, but I just don't see it happening from the get-go. But again, for 6.5 million, you won't get too many players that play as consistently as he does and that also have penalties. With Walker-Peters, I mean, 4.5 million defenders, there's only going to be a select few that I choose from. Once you've got one, again, from Arsenal, Brighton, etc., they're always going to take precedent over one that kind of plays for Southampton. And Southampton's defence last year was really bad, right? They were one of the worst teams for expected goals conceded. Whether or not they'll turn that around this year, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't have any interest from the get-go, from game week 1. Adams at 6.5 million, I think looks like an okay price. I think you've obviously got a lot of forwards at 7 and 7.5. If Adams had been any more expensive, he would have been a complete write-off. So if he is kind of first choice, gets a run of games, the fixtures are good, and you need someone a bit cheaper, I wouldn't completely write him off. But again, game week 1 is just not going to happen. And then the same for kind of all the other players, right? There's a lot of defenders on this list. And then Romeo at 5 million, just not going to happen. Redmond at 5.5. Probably not. Same for Armstrong at 5. Again, if they get a good run in the team and we need like cheaper enablers and they are looking good and Southampton are performing well and they've got a good set of fixtures coming up, I wouldn't ever completely write anyone off pretty much, but they have to do a lot to convince me. So yeah, Southampton, probably again, fair prices, but not too much excitement. Right, let's be honest, there was only one player that anyone wanted to see the price for from Fulham, and that was Mitrovic. There was some chatter before prices started being revealed that maybe he might be 7 million this time, just because of the amount of goals he scored in the Championship was pretty ridiculous. But he has come in at 6.5 million. Most of the time, FPL don't price a newly promoted striker, even if they've been in the league before, more than that. So that's what they've gone with this time. And that seems like a perfectly fine price, right? And I think, nailed on, probably going to play close to 90 minutes most games, on penalties, etc., etc. All the same kind of things I said about Tony last year. I do think fixtures may put people off for game week 1 squads with Liverpool, Arsenal and Spurs in there. But right now, if you're looking at the prices that have been released so far, 6.5 million or less for forwards, there ain't much choice. And if that continues and we need someone cheap up front because we want those big midfields, we want those big defences, Mitrovic might still be the best option even with those fixtures. Elsewhere for Fulham, Wilson, De Cordova-Reid, the defenders at 4.5 million, they're just not going to make it into most people's game week 1 side, so they're just not that interesting to talk about. Mitrovic was really the one. Let me know what you think about those prices we discussed in this video. Let me know in the comments below what your thinking is. Do Chilwell and James make your squad? Does it change your thinking on Trent, Robertson, etc.? Let me know in the comments. Obviously, give it a like if you enjoyed it and hit that subscribe button. I am hoping it's just one more day of price reveals now on Monday, and then fingers crossed the game releases on Tuesday. sorted so we can start making some proper content. But you've been watching it, you've been liking, you've been subscribing, so we will finish off these price reveals with day 4 tomorrow. I will catch you then.